guys, Nick here with What Game Now. This is a re-record. We thought this video had already been done, and it apparently has been lost to the ether. So this is a re-record of the Cheetah, Grizzly, Kodiak, done after the fact of the Southern Army box review. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get going. So starting with the Cheetah. The Cheetah was developed originally in the 1880s by Northco. Predominantly, there were other companies involved. I believe it was Cheyenne Mechanic Works was another major component manufacturer. And the goal of the machine was to replace the aging Ferret. The Ferret had been the North's arguably first true recon gear, although that really should go to the Bobcat. Well, the Bobcat has aspects of it. Anyway, the Ferret needed to be replaced. It was an old machine, and if you remember from our Ferret video, the company that made it actually went under shortly after it was introduced. So the Ferret never really got a ton of upgrades. So the North wanted to replace this, and the whole point behind the Cheetah is we have new recon gear, and all this cool stuff that's happened in the last century or so that since the Ferret's introduction has been incorporated. It went over so well that it has been adopted as the primary recon gear of the CNCS, the Confederate Northern City-States, and even sees use as the occasional E-War and Light Trooper variants. So, let's talk about the Cheetah in the game. Starting at the top, all Cheetahs are available in recon and fire support, have a walker ground movement of 9, armor of 5, hull structure 3-3, 1 action, gunnery 4-up, piloting 3+, electronic warfare skill of 4+. They all come with a rocket pack that has been downgraded to damage 6, and a light vibro blade. Traits-wise, they all have agile, arms, and the comms trait, and the majority of them are also going to have an ECM and the sensors trait, with most of them being auxiliary. So, just going through the loadout here. The rocket, alright, let's start at the top. The movement rating is really good. Walker ground 9, particularly when you combo with sensors, means you can leverage this thing's electronic warfare capabilities across most of the table. Armor 5, hull structure 3-3 means the machine is a little bit on the paper-thin side. Not only do you have the reduced hull structure value compared to a hunter, but the extra armor is kind of a big deal. All of a sudden now things like machine guns become scarier. This is somewhat offset by the piloting of 3+ and the agile trait, which means it is very hard to hit. But if you hit it, it can have some problems. Gunnery 4+ is a respectable gunnery score, and I actually think it's a little bit of a trap. One thing about the Cheetah is it actually has that rocket pack on almost all of its variants. I think on all of them, yeah. And some of the variants even get better guns like bazookas and rifles and light autocannons. And one of my complaints with the Cheetah is because it can do decent light trooper roll and decent electronic warfare, it's totally fine, but you need to be very careful when you're running a Cheetah as to what you want it to do. I have seen and I have heard of people using Cheetahs or similar models and, I can take a shot at this tank back here with my rocket pack and maybe do 1 damage when they really should have ECM attacked it or target designated something. I already talked about the piloting. The electronic warfare skill 4+, this is a recon and electronic warfare gear that's expected. You can actually drop it to as low as a 2+ on one of the variants. And weapon loadout, you have a light vibro blade. This is actually a decent duelist machine. The movement rating means it actually can get into combat fairly quickly. You have a light vibro blade which can be upgraded, and you don't have any penalties to your piloting of 3+ melee attacks. So this is actually a respectable duelist machine. And then to close it off, sensors trait is going to give you added range, and ECM means you have the full suite of offensive electronic warfare capabilities, so you can jam somebody and you can fry them with haywire. All in all, in a 9-point package for the baseline Cheetah, which does all of that and says, hey, here's a pack gun and a target designator, it's hard to argue with this. I like Cheetahs. At 9 threat value, it's really good. My only comment and my only word of warning is be careful to make sure you're doing what the Cheetah needs, or your Cheetah's doing what it needs to do. Because sometimes I see people who will go off and do something that there was something better for the Cheetah to do. Sometimes when you give people more options, they actually tend to make more mistakes. Alright, variant land. So Strike Cheetah, it's an extra threat value over the baseline Cheetah, and all it does is it adds a light bazooka to the pack gun. This is one of the ones that I think I'm not a fan of, and the reason why is with sensors 24 and a movement of 9, you don't actually have to be that close to something. You could potentially leverage your ECM 42 inches away if you top speed the Cheetah. The bazooka encourages you to get really, really close though, which you have a lot of room to move with the ECM because of the sensors trait, but you want to get close for the bazooka. This feels like it's being pulled in multiple directions. I like the Cheetah to remain a little bit cagey and use its superior speed to position itself where it needs to be. The bazooka, I mean, it's a point upgrade. You're not losing anything except the target designator. It's okay. Speaking of the target designator, a lot of northern units do have guided weapons, so it's not an insignificant loss to lose the target designator. I did mention that there is a decent argument for a Cheetah duelist, and it's the Strike Cheetah variant that I consider probably the best for that, because you aren't losing anything. You're not going to be using that target designator really with the duelist anyway. With this, particularly if you give it like a shield, I really like the shield on the Cheetah for that reroll in the front arc on defense. Piloting 3-up, agile with a reroll, and you're a veteran. That whole structure and armor issue isn't really that big of a deal. So I don't mind the Strike Cheetah as a duelist. As a Cheetah doing Cheetah things, I'm not a fan, because I think it pulls it in different directions. Speaking of things that I am a fan of, though, White Cats at 11 threat value. This sounds really expensive, but you swap your Pat Gun for a light autocannon. See my argument for the light bazooka? I'm not the biggest fan of this swap, mostly because I think it encourages you to maybe make bad choices. But what do you get out of it? Well, I'm glad you asked. The ECM becomes an ECM plus, and it's no longer auxiliary. So you're always going to have your ECM. You also pick up an ECCM just in case somebody tries to fry somebody around you with electronic warfare. Still got the target designator, the baseline variant, but you pick up a satellite uplink for that sweet, sweet electronic warfare 3-up in some cases, and Sensors 36. This is the premier electronic warfare variant of the Cheetah. I love it. It has all of the defensive buffs that you want to see out of the baseline Cheetah, and because it's an ECM plus, it starts with ECM defense in play. Fantastic. This model, you're looking at piloting 3-up, it's agile, and it's got an extra die from the ECM defense more often than not. Particularly if you make this a veteran for the critical skill point, I like this thing. I really do. It's my favorite variant. Alright, Metal Cat. So the Metal Cat is only 8 threat value. It's available in strike groups, which is all very good. It strips out all the electronic warfare capability except comms, and gives you the Strike Cheetah's traits. This is essentially a Strike Cheetah, but without all the electronic warfare stuff, which means that I'm actually okay with it. It's a Cheetah that's trying to go use its bazooka, leverage its high speed. This is a perfectly reasonable, respectable model. I like it, particularly in strike groups. It's a very inexpensive model. It does have the comms trait, so it can be a commander, or it can be an effective commander at least. And it's not trying to pull you in different directions. It wants to get close. It wants to leverage that bazooka. It doesn't mind using that rocket pack. And with a piloting a 3-up and agile, you're probably going to get there. And you got the gunnery to back it up. Alright, closing it off, we have the Sniper Cheetah. The Sniper Cheetah is a Strike Cheetah, but has a rifle instead. Now, my complaint with the Strike Cheetah was it encourages you to get close, but you kind of want to stay flexible with the movement rating and the sensors trait. And that didn't quite jive that well for me. And the Sniper Cheetah is in a very similar way. The rifle encourages you to space out a little much, and in some cases you space out longer than your move and sensors can go. So I've seen people take a Sniper Cheetah, put it in a sniper position and use it as a sniper, and never really get the chance to use its electronic warfare capability. Now, while it's not a bad sniper, I don't feel that's the most effective use of a Cheetah. So basically, to summarize, I like the regular Cheetah variant. I love the White Cat. I think the Metal Cat has some fantastic uses. The Strike Cheetah and the Sniper Cheetah, as Cheetahs, I don't tend to like because of the electronic warfare capability, but I don't mind the Strike as a duelist. Alright, on to the Grizzly. So the Grizzly was the follow-up to the rather popular but flawed Bear in the CNCS, which was the first devoted fire support gear that the North had. It had some issues. The Grizzly was an all-around improvement and was designed to provide fire support to friendly forces. Notes about it is generally considered to be very well armored and fairly durable, and its variants tend to favor fire support with an emphasis on closer range stuff. So, Grizzlies, they're all strike and fire support, pretty standard. Walker ground movement of 5, a little bit on the slow side, not apocalyptically slow, but still they're going to take a little bit longer to get somewhere. One thing about Heavy Gear Blitz is because of how movement works and the fact that most models can move twice in a turn if they really need to get somewhere, every inch of lost movement hurts a little bit more than you might think. Armor 8, hull structure 4-2. Pretty durable machine here. Armor 8 is kind of a big deal. Armor 9 is better because of how the math works out, but Armor 8 with a hull structure 4-2 means it's going to take a little bit to plink a Grizzly to death. One action, pretty standard. We'll get to it in a moment, but it's pseudo 2 actions. Gunnery 4-ups, pretty standard. Piloting 5-ups a little bit on the lower side, but again, you've got the defenses to take a few hits. Electronic Warfare 6+. This can get improved to a 5+ with the Thunder Grizzly upgrade, but excuse me, this is not a great electronic warfare machine. There is a command variant. I'm not a huge fan. Traits-wise, they all have the arms and the React Plus trait. React Plus gives you a free reaction every turn, which is kind of the pseudo-free reaction that Grizzly has, and React Plus is very common on fire support gears to let them use their artillery weapons and still contribute otherwise. And then, weapons loadout-wise, all Grizzlies have a light vibro blade. Okay. Heavy machine gun. Okay. A medium linked rocket pack on pretty much every variant. We're going to talk about that in a minute. A lot of the variants also feature a pack gun, and it is worth noting that with one exception, all the variants do have a guided weapon. So, let's break this down here. The vibro blade, you're not going to use it. It just means that you're not taking a penalty in close combat because you're unarmed. You're piloting 5-up. You're really not going to get a lot of mileage out of this. Heavy machine gun, in case somebody gets really close with infantry and the Grizzly has to be the one to deal with it, fine. The medium rocket pack is worth talking about here because the rocket pack, because it's a medium, starts at damage 8, it's linked, which gives it an extra die. It has exactly the same range bands as a heavy autocannon, but has armor piercing instead. The heavy autocannon has the split trait, but with the rocket pack's area of effect and how that works and interacts, the rocket pack is actually, in my opinion, strictly better than the heavy autocannon. The only downside of the heavy rocket pack you're going to see on these is you can't reaction fire with it, but that's not the end of the world because a lot of them have some kind of indirect or guided weapon that they're probably going to be reacting with anyway. So a lot of times I see a Grizzly fire its medium rocket pack and then use its React Plus for a guided mortar or an anti-tank missile or something. Because of this, when we look at the variants, we're going to look at what its other arm weapon is and really question how much value does it get out of it. So, let's go ahead and talk about variants here. Let's start with the baseline Grizzly. At 12 threat value, I like the baseline Grizzly. It's kind of a steal. You have a heavy autocannon. I don't know why. I don't like the heavy autocannon, mostly because you have the medium rocket pack. And I just don't see it coming up that much. If you're using the heavy autocannon on the Grizzly as in reaction fire, I feel like something else is going on that you need to keep track of. One interesting note about the Grizzly that I think is worth pointing out is it has a medium guided mortar, and it's worth noting this and the Destroyer both have a medium guided mortar. And one of the cool things about that is because of the way that the guided trait works is it's effectively you can shoot anything in your range without any penalty. Because of this, I want to say something. I see a lot of people play Grizzlies reasonably far back as a fire support gear. They're actually can be much more aggressive than that. There is no reason your Grizzly can't be playing middle of the table. You've got the armor, hull, and structure to survive, and your range bands, particularly on your rocket pack, are up to 18 inches. Your guided mortar doesn't care. The Grizzly can play very aggressive, and I encourage people to really take a step back and look at that, because the Grizzly doesn't need to hang in the back. Alright, let's talk variants here. So the Rabid Grizzly swaps the heavy autocannon for a grenade launcher, and swaps the field mortar, or swaps the guided mortar for a field mortar. I wish this thing had a guided mortar, because this would be strictly better than the regular Grizzly. Because it has a field mortar, it actually does have to consider its ranges a fair bit. And that kind of hurts its flexibility. It just turns into a regular fire support gear. The downside of that is it means you're very rarely being able to leverage a lot of your weapons at one time, which means you've got a lot of extra stuff you're paying for that you're not using. You do have field armor, so this is kind of a fairly durable machine. It actually could be used, there's an argument for it in an offensive role, where the field mortar is bombarding rear line targets and you're using the grenade launcher and rocket pack for stuff up close, so not terrible. The Destroyer Grizzly. So the Destroyer Grizzly you might intuitively think I like because, hey, you've got a nice short-range weapon, but you still have that guided mortar. All of this is good. The problem is it's a heavy bazooka. And the problem with the heavy bazooka is what is getting close enough that you need to use the Grizzly's heavy bazooka on. Okay? A heavy autocannon would work just fine. Your rocket pack probably would have worked just fine if you'd shot it during your turn. What is getting close enough that the bazooka is going to get used? Okay, and particularly the bazooka be used and be the best weapon to use. The bazooka is really good for heavy armored targets. What is getting that close to the Grizzly? So the Destroyer, I don't mind it. It's my least favorite variant because as much as I want to love that heavy bazooka, I wish it was something else. If it was like a rotary cannon, I would love this thing. If that was a medium rotary cannon, I think this would be a fantastic variant. Alright, let's start going to the really different land. The crossbow Grizzly has the heavy autocannon and all that, but the big difference here is it drops the mortars and the rocket pack for an anti-tank missile. You know what? You got a medium anti-tank missile. It's a really good weapon on reaction fire to blow off to a target designated unit. It is worth noting that you are guided. Make sure you indirect. You got to be careful with all those interactions. But you have two major weapons, the anti-tank missile and the heavy autocannon, that complement each other well. They encourage you and have options at various ranges. I like crossbow Grizzlies. It's got some good potential there. Lastly is the Defender, which I think it's a little underrated. You have a light laser cannon, and particularly with the 3.0 changes, the light laser cannons become a lot more attractive. And you have anti-air missiles, nobody really cares, but you get to keep your rocket pack. I like my Defender Grizzlies. You don't really have a reaction fire artillery weapon, but you can totally reaction fire with that laser cannon, and with the laser cannon traits, that's not a bad deal. So I think the Defender gets a little bit, I don't see it so much maligned, but just ignored, and I think that's unfair. And then lastly, the Grizzly does have a command variant. I don't really use it, mostly because I think you're better off taking like a recon gear, like a Cheetah would be a fantastic example. Notice that you can build a fire sport gear that has Cheetahs and Grizzlies in it. Just make one of the Cheetahs the commander or something. The only reason that I would look at the Thunder Grizzly upgrade is if the Cheetahs are going to be playing way out of position, which they might be. There's nothing wrong with that. But because they're playing out of position, they won't be in range to necessarily give the Grizzlies their orders. They'll have to roll for it, which, I mean, a Cheetah is rolling on a 4-up, especially if it's a white cat. It's pretty reliable, but I can understand that. But on the whole, I'm not a fan of the command upgrade. Alright, Kodiak. So the Kodiak was developed during the War of the Alliance to counter CEF hover tanks. The North wanted something that can go tangle with them toe-to-toe. It proved very successful and was retained in the inventory, although largely due to its expense. It's not seen in many places, and the ones that do use it tend to use it as a heavy assault or fire-based unit, and you'll see that with its profile. So all Kodiaks, and they're all very similar. The only thing that changes between the variants is the main weapon. So they're all strike and fire sport, so pretty good. Walker ground movement of 5, armor 9, hull structure 4-2. So armor 9, 4-2 is pretty durable, really durable actually, because the armor 9 is kind of a tipping point in the way that the dice math works. Armor 9 is where things really start having problems doing damage to you. Walker ground movement of 5, it's not exactly fast, but it's not absurdly slow. Still, you're not going to want this thing. You want to deploy this thing and not expect it to move too much. 2 actions. So a very important thing about 2 actions, since this is one of the first cases of 2 actions we'll see, I look for what is your 2 actions going to be on a turn-by-turn basis. What are these 2 actions going to get you? And how well does that interact? Gunnery 3-up, thumbs up there. Piloting 5-up, not good, but armor 9, hull structure 4-2. EW 6+, and it has no command variants or ways to modify that, aside from upgrades. This is not a recon machine. This is not a command machine. This is a reasonable duelist machine. Although it's not really a close combat duelist, it's more of a ranged duelist. All Kodiaks come with the arms and the veteran trait, so the fact that it comes with veteran for that passive reroll is a really big deal. They all have a medium vibroblade, a anti-personnel grenade launcher, heavy machine gun, anti-tank missile, and rocket pack. So let's break all this down. You have a somewhat slow-moving but heavily armored target. It's got a good gunnery skill and a free upgrade. Weapon loadout, you have a medium vibroblade. See the Grizzly? You're not using this thing to hit that much, unless you're using like a brawler or something like that and using upgrades to get that. I don't think a Kodiak, if it's making melee attacks, is doing what a Kodiak should. You have a medium anti-personnel grenade launcher, so if infantry gets super close to you, you can just kill them. And you have a heavy machine gun, so if infantry try and get too close to you, you can blow them apart. This is a little excessive, but okay. A light anti-tank missile, this is kind of a big deal because I think it's one of the main weapons that the Kodiak's going to use on a turn-by-turn basis. The anti-tank missile is a really powerful weapon. I highly recommend, if you haven't had a chance to look at its profile yet, it is its namesake. It is an anti-tank missile. Heavy rocket pack, it's not linked or anything, so you know, I don't mind it. It's a good, slightly shortish range weapon, but it hits really hard and helps you, and it helps keep an armor punch. The nice thing about the Kodiak is, regardless of what variant you choose, you always have the option for a rocket pack and an anti-tank missile to knock a couple hit points off a tank without really having to roll too many dice. Alright, so general uses of the Kodiak before we go into the variants. I actually think the Kodiak should be used much like a Grizzly should, where it is a much more aggressive unit. It's playing in the middle of the table in no man's land. This is not designed to sit back. The nice thing about the Kodiak is it doesn't have that indirect weapon to make people feel like they should hang back. So play your Kodiak's aggressive. If I was playing a Kodiak, I'd probably plop it in the middle of the table and walk it forward on the first turn, just to look at it and say, hey, guess what you have to deal with. I have the chance to go anywhere I want, slowly, but I'll get there eventually. And with the weapon ranges I've got, I can dominate large areas of the table. Not necessarily dominate, but affect. Alright, variance-wise, the baseline Kodiak has a medium particle accelerator, and I want to call this one out as a particularly interesting variant. The particle accelerator has the advanced and haywire traits. The baseline Kodiak, because of this, becomes an anti-heavy target model. It's essentially a tank-killing tank, except not a tank. It is a heavy gear designed to kill other really heavy gears. It's designed to go hunting King Cobras, hover tanks, you name it. And what that particle accelerator is going to do is, if you hit somebody with it, they're haywired, which means they're crippled. That can set up other attacks, or use the Kodiak's other weapons to be much more effective because now they're rolling less defense dice. I really like the medium particle accelerator on the Kodiak. It encourages you to play far forward. The King Cobra has a particle accelerator as well, but it's being pulled in more different directions because of its weapons. The Kodiak is mono-tasked. Go in the middle of the table and go kill stuff, and I like that. Your other variants, you have a chain gun Kodiak, which has a heavy rotary cannon. And you know what? Perfectly reasonable. The nice thing about the heavy rotary cannon is it gives you something that has a high degree of accuracy when compared to some other factions or some other variants, and I think that that's particularly useful. Having the option to engage multiple targets is always good, and the fact that it's a heavy means it hits fairly hard. So chain gun Kodiak, thumbs up. Destroyer Kodiak, my least favorite variant. Thankfully, it's also the cheapest. Mostly because, again, what is that bazooka going to do at Walker Ground Movement 5? The optimal range on a bazooka is only 6 to 12 inches, which is a little low. There's some problems, particularly on a model this slow, and if there's terrain involved, you're going to have a problem leveraging it. Now, on the other hand, you're forcing it into the middle of the table. There's a decent chance you will get a chance to use that bazooka, and even if you never fire it, you've still got your heavy rocket pack, and you've still got your anti-tank missiles. So while this is my least favorite variant, I don't consider it by any means bad. The difference here with, say, the Grizzly is, what is the Grizzly doing on a turn-by-turn basis in addition to the rocket pack, and how does that gel with the rest of its weapons? The Destroyer is going to keep moving across the table. The Grizzly is going to kind of, I imagine a Grizzly kind of not crossing the center line of the table. The Kodiak's going to go all the way. So that brings us through the Northern Army box. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a good one.
Hey, this is Dave. If you like what we're doing here at What Game Now, go ahead and click on one of the videos which should be on either side of me, or click right in the middle and go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell once you subscribe so that you know when we have new videos. Please go ahead and share us with your friends. Let everybody know that we're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for all of our subscribers already. And we look forward to bringing you more content every chance that we get.